Hey, Wayne Fox back with another video for those new to Lightroom. This one is about the catalog file. There's a few things that are helpful to know. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can, not the most interesting thing. Some of you might be watching the video because you're interested in my opinions on multiple catalogs and how to split those up. And I'll have a timestamp below if you want to skip all the other stuff and get straight to that, you can go to that. Anyway, let's get right into the catalog file. The catalog file is the working document file type of Lightroom. When you install Lightroom for the first time, it will create a default catalog for you. This will be located in your Pictures folder on a Mac or your My Pictures folder on a PC inside a folder called Lightroom. The catalog file is the .lrcat file inside this folder, and you'll notice there's a matching Lightroom catalog previews.lr data file. Every Lightroom catalog file has a LR data file associated with it. This contains previews that Lightroom uses to speed things along, and it always must have the exact same name as the catalog that it matches with space previews.lr data added to it. If you change that name, then when you open the Lightroom catalog the next time, it will make a new file because it won't recognize that name. You may or may not see a Lightroom settings folder inside of this. Eventually this will probably show up. This is where Lightroom keeps your personal presets and templates as you create them, and it depends on some of your preference settings as to whether it shows up in this folder or not. The helper.lr data file was added recently, and it's a cache file that helps Lightroom speed up searching your folder structure if you have a large catalog. It's much like the other preview data file. If you discard it, it will be rebuilt when Lightroom needs it again, and you may or may not see this file. Depends on how many folders and files you have imported. If your search function seems funky, giving you weird results, you might try deleting this file so Lightroom will rebuild it the next time you open the catalog. You may see these other files in the folder. These two files tell me that Lightroom is actually running right now. The .lock file basically locks this catalog so that you can't open it with another copy of Lightroom, especially important. The WAL file is a standard SQL database file that's used. It stands for write ahead log, and Lightroom uses SQL as its database structure. As soon as you quit Lightroom, those two files are discarded. If you ever try to open a catalog and it won't open, it might be because these files were left over after a system crash or something like that. If Lightroom isn't running at all, double check your system. As you can see on my system, Lightroom is running right now. If Lightroom isn't running, then you can safely throw those files away. I'm going to go ahead and quit Lightroom. And you should see these two files disappear. You can name the catalog file anything you want. You can do this while in the Finder or in File Explorer as long as the catalog isn't open. So I could call this My Catalog, or let's call it My Cat. If you rename the catalog, I suggest that you highlight and copy the name, and then you go and replace the corresponding name in the previews data file with the same name. That will allow Lightroom to recognize that previews data file and I won't have to make a new one. If you end up with two previews.lr data files inside your folder, that means that you did this, and just discard the one that doesn't have the matching name. I also suggest that if you rename the catalog, that you go back and you rename the folder that contains the catalog, and that way you can have multiple catalogs with different folders. Obviously you might want to come up with more of a useful name and description than My Cat, but that way I always make sure that the folder name is the exact same name as my catalog. You can move the catalog file anywhere that you want. If you move it, make sure that you move the entire folder. So let's say that I wanted to move this catalog file up to my desktop. I could just do that right there. If you move just the catalog file itself, it loses its connection with your other folders, and thus will reset your defaults and will have to rebuild a new data file. The image file paths that are pointed to inside the catalog are not relative to the location of the catalog. They're strictly based on where they are located on hard drives or network locations. So it really doesn't matter where the catalog file is in relationship to all of your other image files. However, in my case, I always keep the catalog file inside a folder which also contains all of the corresponding image files. So that way everything is all self-contained, and I can back up that entire folder to another hard drive or to a network location to make sure that I have everything backed up. When you import your image files into Lightroom, what you're doing is telling Lightroom where they are located on your various storage devices. The files are organized within the structure of the standard operating system that you happen to be using at the time. Notice here, if you look, I have a Lightroom data, which represents my hard drive, and if I reveal this in the Finder, you'll see that the structure here on Lightroom matches exactly the structure here other than this folder, and that's because this folder is the folder that contains my actual catalog that I have open right now. If I open any of these folders here, so we'll open that folder, and if I open the same folder here, you'll see that that structure matches exactly. So Lightroom manages all of this within the operating system, and there's really no reason to use the operating system to do anything. If I wanted to change the name of this folder here, I could just change it over here. So I can rename this, and let's just get rid of the word Aspen for the heck of it. And we save that. And now if we go back to the Finder, we'll see that that change was sent to the operating system and made the change just like if we would have done it inside the Finder or File Explorer. This means that Lightroom can assist you in this organization of your files. It can move files, it can copy files, it can rename files, it can add some useful metadata to files. And when you import them, you can even apply some developed presets. Lightroom is very good at this, and in fact, you can organize your image files faster, more efficiently if you do all of that within Lightroom and never use File Explorer or the Finder once you import the images into Lightroom. It is important to understand that Lightroom does not store your image files. It doesn't do anything to your image files other than what you would do if you were using the Finder or the File Explorer itself. It's simply sending the same instructions to your operating system. And Lightroom Classic does not move or copy your image files into a special proprietary structure or the cloud like many other similar programs do. The catalog file is a database file, and it stores metadata about your image files. One of the most important ones is the location of that file within the operating system. If you make changes to the file name or its location, those changes are sent to the operating system just like the Finder or File Explorer does. There is no risk of doing this from within Lightroom. If you make any changes to the files after importing them in the Finder or File Explorer, Lightroom doesn't know about them, and you will have to go find them and link them again. This can be very, very problematic. That's why it's usually better to never use the Finder or File Explorer for any of the tasks related to this. Once you import the images into Lightroom, just do it from within Lightroom. When Lightroom imports the files, it also imports all the metadata that the camera created at the time. But Lightroom's real power comes in that it can modify the metadata to control many aspects of the image appearance. Because they are metadata changes, nothing you do affects the actual file itself. All of this metadata is stored in the catalog, and you can override metadata created by the camera when it was created. As you work on the file in the Develop module, Lightroom shows the results of those metadata changes in real time. Understand that Lightroom is not a pixel editor like Photoshop, and while metadata editing is extremely powerful and often all that is necessary, there are some things that Photoshop can do which Lightroom cannot do, or which Photoshop can do better or faster or easier. Lightroom will prompt you to back up when quitting the program. How often it prompts you depends on your preference settings. This backup has nothing to do with your image files. You must have your own strategy to back those up. Basically, Lightroom copies the catalog file to a new folder inside your catalog folder called Backups. Once it copies it, it will compress that into a zip file. If your catalog file gets corrupted, you can unzip the most recent file and replace the corrupted catalog file. Lightroom makes a complete new backup file each time you back up, so you should manually delete the older ones as needed. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of them on there that you don't really need. I only keep the last 4 or 5 at the most. You should really allow Lightroom to back up at least once a week, and if you use Lightroom heavily, I would recommend you back up more often than that. Well, that does it for the catalog file. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Before I end the video, let me talk a little bit about whether you should have multiple catalog files or maybe just one. In my opinion, almost all photographers will have more than one catalog file. The question is, how many should you have, and how do you decide how many? So I have 3 thoughts on that. First of all, if you have different styles of work that never relate to each other, then having multiple catalogs makes a lot of sense. One advantage of Lightroom is that you can have multiple images spread across multiple folders, and you can create a collection, so you can access those images all at the same time to create a project, such as a book or a slideshow or a web page. But if you have photography that you shoot that's not related to another type, for example, maybe you shoot portraits and weddings, and then maybe you also shoot sports, there's really no reason to have your sports images in the same catalog as your portrait images. In my case, I shoot landscape photography, and so I have a landscape catalog, but I also use Lightroom for a lot of personal things that I do, odds and ends and snapshots of the family, and a few miscellaneous projects that I get asked to do, so I have a second catalog for that. Another thought is, if you have images that you don't need to access, but you still want the ability to do so easily, for example, say you're a sports photographer, and each season you might want to have a different catalog, because you really don't need to get back to those pictures from last year very often, but if you do, you want to be able to. Maybe you're also a portrait photographer, and rather than have 10 years worth of portrait sittings in one catalog, which doesn't make any sense, you will find a way to divide that down. So you can go back and find older sittings if you need to in a different catalog, but it doesn't make your current catalog too bogged down. And lastly, considering the size of the catalog itself, Lightroom can handle hundreds of thousands of images fairly efficiently, but as your catalog grows, it can slow down a little bit, and more importantly, the preview file can get massive, and if you ever have to rebuild that preview file, it can take a really long time. So if you have that large of a catalog, you might try to figure out a way to split that down into some logical structure where you can have multiple smaller catalogs. Now, the good news about catalogs is it's very easy to take 2 catalogs or 3 catalogs and combine them into one larger catalog. It's also pretty easy to take a large catalog and to split it out into multiple smaller catalogs. I'll have a video about that later, but in the meantime, if you find you've made a cat mistake and you want a different structure, save a different catalog based on different dates, etc., not too hard to do, so it's not like the decision is going to be something you'll regret later on. Well, that does it for this video. Hopefully I helped some of those that are new to Lightroom. If you like the things I'm doing, don't be afraid to subscribe to the channel. The next video will be about the preference settings in Lightroom. There are a lot of little preferences that are better set, that are more useful, and I'll go over those so you can work with Lightroom fairly efficiently. And maybe I'll go over the basic interface as well, as far as what each of the different interface elements do. We'll see if I decide to break that up into 1 or 2 videos. So until next time, thanks for watching the video.